concerns their ontological foundation, that is, their foundation in reality. He says, if they are neither derived from God, nor anchored in some transcendent ground, are they purely ephemeral? And I think we both agree that in the absence of God, the answer is yes, they are purely ephemeral. As Richard Dawkins has written, there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but pointless indifference. We are machines for propagating DNA. It is every living object's sole reason for being. So on an atheistic view, it seems very plausible to me that the moral values evolved by Homo sapiens on this planet are not objective. Massimo Pigliucci is an evolutionary biologist. He agrees. He writes as follows: there is no such thing as objective morality. Morality in human cultures has evolved, and what is moral for you might not be moral for the guy next door, and certainly is not moral for the guy across the ocean. And what makes you think that your personal morality is the one, and everyone else is wrong? He says what we call homicide or rape, or even infanticide, is very, very common among different types of animals. Lions, for example, commit infanticide on a regular basis. Now, he says, are these kinds of acts to be condoned? I don't even know what that means, he says, because the lion doesn't understand what morality is. Morality is an invention of human beings. So, on an atheistic view, there simply is no transcendent foundation for moral values. They are the socio-culturally and personally relative byproducts of human and biological evolution. But I submit that that is wholly implausible in light of our moral experience. We do grasp objective moral values, the common moral beliefs that Dr. Cooke referred to in his speech. He said, must we believe in God in order to be moral? Can't we all affirm the common moral principles that we grasp? Of course we can. You don't need to believe in God in order to live a moral life. That is not my argument. He's confusing our knowledge of moral values with the foundation for moral values. I think that all persons can grasp the objective moral values that do exist. But the question is, on atheism, is there any foundation for the intrinsic value of human beings? And I think we both agree that there isn't one. Fourthly, I argued that the evidence for the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus point to a miraculous explanation as the best account of why the tomb was empty, the appearances occurred, and the disciples came to believe that Jesus was risen from the dead. And I want to emphasize here that these three facts are not the opinion of conservative scholars or fundamentalist scholars. These represent the wide mainstream opinion of New Testament historians today. And I can't think of any better explanation for them than the one that the original disciples gave, namely God raised Jesus from the dead, and that entails that God exists. Finally, I mentioned the immediate experience of God. I think that you can know that God exists wholly apart from arguments. All right. And unless Dr. Cooke can give me some arguments for atheism, why should I deny what is real in my experience? Why should I regard my experience of God as delusory in the absence of some good argument for atheism? So until and unless he gives us such an argument, I think we're rational to stick with belief in God.
Here's where it becomes this sort of rather tiresome he said, she said squabble that I mentioned at the beginning of my address. I was hoping to avoid this sort of thing. I'd much rather we go straight on to questions now. I'm just going to end up repeating what I said before. I'm not interested in whether... I'm not here to persuade Dr. Craig to become an atheist. I'm not here to persuade any of the theists in this room to become an atheist. I'm here because I'm not an evangelist. I'm here because I want to give a reasonable, non-judgmental and civilized account of how you live a moral life without God. And what I tried to do in my address was to do that. Now, I'm not a cosmologist, neither is Dr. Craig, and I'm not going to start talking about the creation of the universe. I don't know. Let's start being honest about the limits of our knowledge. The limits of my knowledge are very great indeed. It seems to me that it is not uncontroversial, however, to assert, as Dr. Craig does, that the universe has to have a cause. I'm not going to say anything more than that, beyond saying it doesn't seem to me to be just as straightforward as he maintains. But the other point is that, of course, as goes back to Hume and people, that even if the creator God, such as Dr. Craig has posited, is alive and well, as he's asserted, we've got no indication whatsoever that that's the Christian God. It could be any one of the other gods from my encyclopedia. It could be the one on page 117. So we've got no account that the Christian God is the one that's being recommended here. He talks about the consensus of scholarship with respect to Jesus. We're certainly, obviously, reading different accounts. I mean, the consensus of scholarship, as far as I'm concerned, is that Jesus was a Jew. Jesus, as a Jew, had no intention of founding a new religion. He spoke to, as the New Testament says, the lost sheep of the house of Israel only. He was not interested. Paul is the founder of Christianity, not Jesus. Jesus was an eschatological prophet, an exorcist. That's the consensus of Jesus, as I understand it, from people like Gezer, Werms. Dr. Craig mentioned Gerd Ludemann. I was surprised to hear his name mentioned. Gerd Ludemann is an atheist and has argued in his more recent books, such as I am arguing with respect to Jesus. He was thrown out of his office in Germany, his academic position, because of his beliefs. No, there's no foundation to ethics. Our ethics grow and develop evolutionarily by trial and error. Reciprocal altruism is what the evolutionary psychologists talk about when Ugg the caveman gets a bit of pterodactyl bone and shares a bit of it with Slug in the cave next door, in the hope that next week, if Ugg doesn't get a bone, Slug will reciprocate and give him a bit. If he finds that Slug doesn't reciprocate, he thinks, well, not cooperating with him, I'll go to Thug on this side and try. And we learned to cooperate. Evolutionary thinking is as much about cooperation as it is competition. That was reciprocal altruism. We learned to reciprocate. In moral language, that became the golden rule. This is why the golden rule is ubiquitous across the cultures. I'm not going to say any more because it's just going to be repeating what I'm saying, and I don't want to engage too much in a he said, she said squabble. Thank you.
Right, well now, according to the established plan, Dr. Craig now has a further rebuttal for up to 8 minutes.
Well, I don't find debates boring. I think it's very exciting to have the exchange of ideas and repartee and rebuttal. And I was disappointed that Dr. Cooke did not choose to redefend any of his points concerning atheism with respect to my first contention, that that rather there are no good reasons to think that atheism is true. And therefore, I think we've seen nothing on the atheist side of the scale tonight to make us think that belief in God is a delusion, that it is a false belief. What about the arguments then that I offered for the existence of a creator and designer of the universe who is the locus of goodness.